a woman what she can do and cannot do with her own body. How dare they?
The battle lines are drawn as the Supreme Court appears set to reverse nearly 50 years of abortion rights in the United States. Hello, I'm Arnold Naidoo, and this is The Heat. The headline sent shockwaves across the country. The United States Supreme Court has voted to strike down the landmark law Roe versus Wade, according to an initial draft opinion obtained by the Politico news outlet. If true, it would be a repudiation of the 1973 decision guaranteeing federal constitutional protections of abortion rights to millions of women. Well, for more now, we turn to CGTN's White House correspondent, Nathan King. Nathan, great to have you with us. A shockwave, yes, but not a complete surprise. There were warning signs. So break it down for us. What's in this draft decision, and what does it mean for a country that's actually relied on what was said to be settled law for nearly 50 years?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely in the making for the last number of decades, but certainly has accelerated in the last few years, especially with Donald Trump's ability to get 3 Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court. And remember, take Trump literally and seriously, because he said he would only be appointing judges who would overturn Roe versus Wade. Now, that's despite the fact that they also, they're hearing that, well, they stick by stare decisis and precedent and basically it's settled law, but there was enough there to know that if a case came, and it was already moving its way to the Supreme Court. Now, in this opinion, which was leaked, and of course this is not the final ruling of the court, by Judge Alito, essentially he throws everything against Roe versus Wade, going back to say abortion was not mentioned in the US Constitution. Let's face it, what else was about modern life? Also, the fact that it is that the decision has, in his view, created more divisions. Well, the opinion polls don't necessarily say that, but there is a very vocal minority, as you know, against the right to abortion. And also, there are other legal scholars who are very worried about it's not just about Roe versus Wade, but same-sex marriage and other federal protections, which have been interpreted as essentially under the equal protection clauses of the law, to apply not just to women's bodies, but also choices in life that are open to normal, what was considered normal genders, like man and a woman. So this is definitely a Supreme Court that is out of touch with generally the public. If you look at the opinion polls, for example, a majority, and it's pretty heavy majority, have largely stuck by Roe versus Wade. Now listen to the US president, because he really came out swinging here. As you know, the Democrats have backed a woman's right to choose basically since Roe was codified into law.
It basically says all the decisions related to your private life, who you marry, whether or not you decide to conceive a child or not, whether or not you can have an abortion, a range of other decisions, whether or not how you raise your child. What does this do? And does this mean that in Florida they can decide they're going to pass a law saying that same-sex marriage is not permissible? It's against the law in Florida. So there's a whole, it's a fundamental shift in American jurisprudence.
On the filibuster, the president did do away with the filibuster to codify Roe.
I'm not prepared to make those judgments now about, but you know, I think the codification of Roe makes a lot of sense.
So codification, filibuster, words you may have heard before. Essentially what this is an effort by Democrats now in the Senate, we could see a vote next week, to basically bring federal abortion protections into law, because as you know, Roe versus Wade was settled as a case and was never passed as legislation. The chance of doing that, the filibuster, are pretty much zero, because you need 60 votes and the Republicans will not go along, or at least the 10 of them required, and even a couple of Democrats, Anna.
So Nathan, let's look at the electoral politics of this. Before all of this, Republicans were expected to make a pretty strong showing and likely take control of both houses of Congress after the midterm elections, which take place towards the end of this year. We also look at President Biden. He's got low poll numbers, inflation, prices are going up, now standing at what, 8.5%.
Yep.
So This debate, the abortion debate, is it likely to swing enthusiasm towards Democrats, especially the women vote?
I mean, obviously, there are a lot of angry people out there. You just have to see the scenes out of the Supreme Court. I live quite nearby. That road is blocked off now because essentially there are demonstrators there every day. The vast majority are pro Roe versus Wade, pro-abortion rights. So there is a hope, and this is cynical, but it's Washington politics, that it will get people out to vote come November, although November is quite a long time away, but we could get the actual decision overturning Roe versus Wade, if it does happen, sometime in the summer. So there is that. However, remember, this is also going to be seen as a huge victory on the conservative right, that if you chip away, if you turn up, if you vote locally and federally and try and back cases that chip away at Roe versus Wade, eventually you will win. So I would say it could motivate both sides. But the Democrats are hoping, with a not so popular president, to make this issue perhaps make people sit up, take notice. And that's why they're sort of suggesting there are other rights at threat going down the path as well.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting.
Thanks.
Well, there is much to talk about. Let's get to our panel. Rina Shah is a political analyst and commentator. Spencer Critchley serves as a Democratic strategist and communications consultant. Also with us is columnist Brandon Brice. He hosts the Bryce is Right radio program. And Eleanor Clift is a political columnist with the Daily Beast. Thanks, everyone, for being with us. Eleanor, let me start with you. The draft decision removes protections provided by Roe versus Wade across the country. It covers the country in a federal way, but states can still pass their own laws as far as abortion is concerned. Now, I know you are a very experienced political reporter. You've been covering this city for a long, long time. What do you make of this?
Well, it's the first time that the Supreme Court has taken away a constitutional right. And the foundation for doing that, they claim, or this conservative majority, if it goes through with it, what they claim is that the right to have an abortion in the early weeks and months before viability is based on a right to privacy that is not directly enumerated in the Constitution. And that right to privacy is also the foundation for other major decisions like same-sex marriage, even contraception. So I think there is a worry that this is not simply turning the issue back to the states, that the politics have shifted significantly in the last almost 50 years. And you now have 20-odd states with what are called trigger laws, that if the federal protection for abortion is withdrawn, that the state would automatically ban it within their boundaries. And then you have other state legislatures trying to wrest power over this from the courts, basically, and passing legislation it's like bounty hunting, encouraging people to turn in providers who perform abortion, women who get abortion. And so The feeling is that this could spin out of control, that if you make something illegal, there then have to be penalties, and the penalties would fall on the providers, would fall on the doctors, perhaps even the women. And the anti-abortion movement has been so focused on getting Roe and its successor legislation, Casey, overturned, that there really isn't much thought given to what a post-Roe America would look like. And it wouldn't be it wouldn't be the same as the pre-Roe America, and that wasn't all that great either. So it's really taken the lid off of a huge tangle of laws and motivations and power struggles that are going to dominate not only this election season, but many election seasons into the future.
Brandon Brice, the Republicans have been trying to get Roe versus Wade reversed for some time, and now that we know it's going to happen, we haven't seen much in the way of a celebration from Republican politicians. In fact, the response has been pretty muted. Is there perhaps a sense that this might not be politically popular. I know, as we heard from our correspondent Nathan King a moment ago, he was saying that it seems that the court is out of touch with popular opinion in the United States.
You know, I always say, you know, in this instance, Republicans won the battle. The problem is they may have lost the war. I mean, you're talking about an issue that not only impacts women, who Republicans have already had challenges with getting, but you're talking about at a time when we've got an opportunity to literally take back 2022, to take back the House, and hopefully to take back the presidency, looking at the president's numbers being, you know, less than 10%. This is not, so in other words, was it a good thing? If you're on the right, perhaps. Was it the best time? Absolutely not, especially when you have Republicans that are gearing up to say 2022, House seats are starting to turn. And so now this could have been the camel that brought, the straw that broke the camel's back as it relates to getting Republicans back in control in the House. And this could have lasting impacts on 2024. Again, with a group that already was not popular with Republicans in previous elections, this is going to be impacted in the 22 elections. When you're talking about, are women going to come out at a time like this? And as you can see, Democrats already smell blood in the water, where they're already starting with narratives about my body, my choice. It's going to have big issues. And if you're on the Republican Party ticket now, you're saying, how do we counter this? Because they're going to feel this in 2022.
Spencer Critchley, what do you make of that? Will this be advantageous politically in terms of electoral politics for the Democrats?
You would think it should be. Unfortunately, Democrats have a long record of having winning issue positions and managing to run losing campaigns on those winning issue positions. And I say that with deep regret as a lifelong Democrat. I think that abortion is almost the perfect issue to identify this problem, which is a problem that Democrats, especially since the post-World War II boom, have become increasingly well-educated and worse at politics, more and more stuck in their heads, more and more speaking a language of legalism, rationalism, bureaucratic policy points. And with abortion, you're dealing with one of the most intense cultural, moral issues imaginable. It's an issue of life and death and children. I favor abortion rights, but I don't favor the way that Democrats usually campaign on this issue.
Right.
I think the messaging has been a mistake, frankly, from the beginning. And you know, the privacy right, I just want to mention as well, often sounds like it's the right not to have people poke into your personal affairs, like doctor's appointments. It's a very deep right that goes back to Aristotle, and it's the definition of avoiding government interference in your private life. And of course, it's contained in the Constitution, because the whole point of the Constitution, and this used to be a conservative position, was that you don't need to specify rights because you already have them. The government can't give them to you. And yet it appears that Alito has completely reversed the traditional conservative approach to what rights actually are.
And Spencer, we also have somewhat of a bizarre situation here, because if we look at the parties right now here in Washington, the Democrats have both houses. They have the House of Representatives and the United States Senate and the White House, but it's Republicans that are moving ahead with their agenda.
Yeah, I mean, the question I asked to my fellow Democrats, especially Democrats in Congress and Democrats running campaigns, is why is it even close? We have one party, the Democratic Party, that remains in favor of democracy, and one party that is attacking democracy. And I used to reject language like that, and I'd caution people, don't be so over the top. You may disagree with them, but they believe in democracy as much as you do. That is no longer true. And why? So Democrats have to ask themselves, why is it even close? And I think, you know, it's not just the ferocity of the attack on democracy, it's the weakness of the defense that we have to be concerned about.
Rina Shah, at this stage, there's something like 26 states which are likely to ban, or in some cases will be certain to ban, abortions without the protection of Roe versus Wade. The Democratic Senator, Elizabeth Warren, she has warned that the most vulnerable will be the hardest hit by this court decision. Let's listen to some of what she had to say.
What I feel angry about is that an extremist Supreme Court is going to impose their views on the rest of America. And you know who this is going to fall hardest on? It's not going to fall hardest on well-to-do women. They can afford to get on a plane and go to another state where abortion is legal. They can afford to leave the country. Who this is going to fall hardest on is going to be on poor women.
So, Rina, does the senator have a point there?
Well, I rarely say this, but Senator Warren has a great point there. I disagree with her on many things, but she is absolutely spot on here. The data tells us that Black and Latina women, according to the Guttmacher Institute, are more likely to seek an abortion, and that's due to income inequality and cost barriers to birth control. So when we're looking at this issue, we need to recognize that those Black and Latina women also face more barriers to abortion due to systemic inequality as well, and Medicaid restrictions on abortion care. So this is exactly what has been feared and talked about in liberal circles for a long time. But if you're somebody like me, I made my career in American conservative politics for many years and continue to work with many who are fiscally conservative. And look, I'm a little socially liberal myself, but I have always given a Mario Cuomo answer, if you will. I'm anti-abortion for myself, but I'm pro-choice for other women. I look at this issue entirely through the lens of democracy. And I think it's important to actually look at it that way, because when you're putting that lens on, you see this for what it is. And this is about bodily autonomy. And I believe that if American women don't have body autonomy, and that's taken from them, they're not really equal citizens, whether you're talking legally, politically, economically. And that's really important for us to recognize as we move into the next century, because how else are we to be viewed on the world stage? Are we going to be hypocrites? Is America going to be viewed as hypocritical? What leg do we have to stand on if we take away reproductive rights? I may not agree with abortion. Other people may not like it either. I'm not saying taxpayer dollars should be funding abortions, but I'm saying that American women should have the right to do what they want to do with their bodies. And so today, if Roe were overturned, we would see some really, really big problems. 25 million American women would lose access to abortion, and that is a problem, because again, there are people out there who are victims of incest and rape and have unintended pregnancies, and they deserve access to abortion if they want to choose it. It's about reproductive rights, and it's not my decision for what another woman does with her body.
Brandon Brice, what do you make of what we've just heard there from Rina? It's a very complex situation, isn't it?
Not only do I agree, but, what I found interesting when the president was speaking is, where was this guy when they were talking about the mandates? All of a sudden, it's an issue when the government wants to mandate what you can do with your body. But this is interesting, because now we're getting into the fact that, let's be very clear. Let's look at the politics here. This is the Democrats very, very rarely are actually caring about the ruling. This is about the fact they see an end to get back in 2022, and they see something now to run on for 2024, given that their leader has an 8% approval rating. The numbers are there. The reality is they needed something to get them back in the game, and this was it. So what's going to be interesting, and I agree with Rina 100%, but what's interesting, watch the politics. It's already starting. Class warfare will counter this ruling.
Eleanor, you wrote a column earlier this week about Senator Susan Collins, who is a pro-rights Republican, and you said, and you put it this way, she said that told American women to trust her. And tell us more about that, as well as the notion that some of the justices in the Supreme Court may have misled, or at worst lied, about their intentions.
Well, Susan Collins is a Republican senator from Maine, and she's well known for being pro-choice, and her brand is basically to stand up within her party on certain issues. She was the deciding vote that gave Brett Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh, that enabled him to be confirmed. That was at the time when the Republicans had control of the Senate, and so they needed 50 votes, and then Vice President Pence would break the tie, and Susan Collins was the 50th vote. And she went to the Senate floor and she spoke for nearly an hour, and she assured the public, but American women in particular, that she had done due diligence about Justice Kavanaugh. She had consulted 19 lawyers who had gone through all his opinions. She had met with him for 2.5 hours. and he had convinced her that he believed that Roe was settled law, that it had been reaffirmed by Casey, so it was super settled law. She said he basically gave her his commitment that Roe would be safe in his hands. Now he's one of the justices on this draft opinion who would be voting to overturn Roe. And so Collins, after I wrote my column, so I didn't have her statement when I wrote the piece late the evening when the draft opinion first surfaced. And she said if this draft opinion is true, that the two justices who met with her, both Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch, that's not what they told her. She stopped short of outright saying they lied, but she came pretty close to it. So yeah, I think there is the former president, President Trump, said that he would only appoint anti-Roe justices. And I think most people believed him. And there was a lot of skepticism about Collins's opinion when she stated it and about her deciding vote. And it turns out now that either she lied or he lied or something changed. But I just want to say one more thing. I think there is an opportunity here for the Democrats to reclaim the agenda of freedom and individual rights, which the Republicans have been running on and doing very well. But you know, they don't want to mandate a mask in the middle of a pandemic, but they want to take away abortion rights. So I think they've forfeited their right to run on freedom and individual rights. And so I think this does scramble the politics, definitely. And but the decision is still a disaster if it comes out the way it's being indicated.
Spencer, it seems that politics is so fluid right now. You know, as Brandon Brice told us just a moment ago, this could be advantageous to Democrats. We could see support shift towards Democrats in the 2022 midterms as well as the 2024 presidential election. But we just had elections, actually. There were primaries in Ohio and Indiana. All 22 candidates in those races were endorsed by President Trump, and they won. We also had President Biden tell us the other day, he said MAGA supporters are the most extreme political organization that existed in recent American history. But it seems Trump still retains control.
Yes, and I actually, before I start, I'd like to check with Brandon who has the 8% approval rating. If he was referring to President Biden, last I saw it was 42%, which isn't great, but it's better than 8%. The thing about President Trump and his influences, I think that people make a big mistake to think that somehow President Trump has a magical power to enlist people into this personality cult he's supposedly running. I think there's a lot about it that does have characteristics of a personality cult, but he's clearly selling a product that people want to buy. And I think that, and they will continue to want to buy it whether he's on the scene or not, as we can see with people like DeSantis and so many others trying to become the next Trump. The thing is, I think that where a lot of us get confused is continuing to think about politics along one dimension, when in fact there are a minimum two dimensions here. The traditional one-dimensional view is one axis, left to right, you know, the far left to the far right with moderates in the middle. But we have to think about a vertical axis, if you will, sort of a set of four boxes in a grid. And that vertical axis is liberalism to illiberalism. And the larger problem that America faces right now, I think, is a upsurge of illiberalism, which is absolutely a catastrophe on the right. And Trump, to me, is just the absolute exemplar of that. But as I say, many people are following his lead. He's not a conservative. He's an ethnic nationalist and a con artist, a gangster, and those two frequently go hand in hand. Now, it's far less of a direct threat to democracy, but there is definitely an upsurge of the illiberal left as well. And I think that people who are still on the axis of liberalism, whether they're at the far left, far right, somewhere in the middle, need to recognize that we're all allies in trying to defend liberal democracy against illiberalism. Again, the most direct, serious threat right now is coming from the illiberal right, but that's the larger issue in my view.
Rina, the other big challenge for President Biden right now, the rising inflation numbers. Let's listen to the conservative Democrat, Senator Joe Manchin. He's talking about his concerns about inflation. Let's listen.
Inflation is the #1 driving factor, I believe, in my state. Right now, it's hurting everybody, not just at the pump, but at the grocery store, at the drugstore, at the pharmaceutical. Everything they do is driven by inflation. They're seeing it everywhere.
There was a recent poll that was published, Rina. It shows that Americans trust Republicans more than Democrats when it comes to handling inflation. But how big a problem is this for Democrats? And is this something that Republicans can run on?
Well, inflation is a massive problem. It's one that I believe that President Biden is daily just scratching his head about, because he's probably wondering how we got here so fast. I say that because I really don't see a great plan from this administration to really fix the pain that so many Americans in my home state of West Virginia, for example, though I no longer live there, but I visit often and have family interests there. I must say it's being felt in every part of the country, but in poorer states like, again, my home state of West Virginia, Manchin's completely right. It's gone beyond the pump. It's on the grocery shelves. I have 3 children myself. I live in next door Virginia and spend time in Washington, D.C. I can tell you, with 3 children, every day I'm looking at the prices of things, and I'm thinking, I'm having sticker shock. I'm having caregivers come to my home and calculating how much they're spending on gas to get here. So this is really a big problem for every single American. Look, the Federal Reserve has taken steps, of course. Yesterday, Jerome Powell, the chairman, announced steps to curb this inflation, to do something. The Federal Reserve had to do something. Of course, the rate hike was not what many were fearing, which was a 75-point basis hike, but it was 50 points. So this is a moment where I think a lot of younger folks like myself, young families, were really confused. This is, I'm not sure I have the real trust that I had when I voted for Biden. I was a Republican who crossed party lines to vote for Biden, but I see a lot around me who did the same in my friend circles and family who are pretty upset right now. And I just don't know that Democrats can message their way out of this one, because to pick up on an earlier point, when we talk about the abortion debate too, when had Democrats really gone for the jugular? When has our messaging had teeth? It feels like Republicans continue to win the day on the messaging because they're willing to get ugly. They're willing to sling the mud. And on the fiscal stuff, Republicans saying, I don't think, look, Trump artificially wanted to keep interest rates low.
Right.
The president does not, historically we know, the U.S. president does not have anything to do with the economy in so many ways, but we unfairly, as American voters, tied the president to the success of the economy. I will say this, the Biden administration kept printing money, and that was the problem. So we are in a really unique situation.
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That is it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.